Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming on time. We are privileged tonight, once again, to welcome Dr. Rona Novick, Dean of Azrieli School of Jewish Education and Administration, I think. Okay. And a prominent psychologist who's done a great deal of work in schools and in communities in the area of bullying and in other areas as well, but bullying is a specialty area. She developed a program that is used widely, Project Brave, and she is a very stimulating and enjoyable speaker and does a lot of speaking. She's spoken here at our last year's Rona Novick, and we are very privileged to have her. I always like to say, because I'm proud of the fact that Dr. Novick is an alumni parent of Yeshiva HaTorah, as her son Gabi was an illustrious graduate of ours and continues to make us proud and make her proud. And so there are connections to Yeshiva HaTorah, and we're very, very fortunate and pleased that Dr. Novick was able to be with us this evening. Please.
Thank you. It's always good to be back in Hartell. These are copies of the slides in case people like to take notes or want copies. It's up there on both sides. We're going to get to definition in a minute, and don't look at the slides. Don't cheat. If I say the word bullying, what do you think of?
Someone beating up on somebody.
Somebody beating up on somebody else. Tough. Putting people down. Multiple kids against one. And, you know, I hate to say this, but almost every time I give a talk, there's something I hear in the car on the way to the talk that is, oh my gosh, I can't believe here we go again. So if you've been, McDonald's. If you've been listening, and not only that, but I'm usually introduced as the bully lady, and I have to remind people I'm the anti-bully lady. So people will say, oh, bully lady, did you see this on the news? Did you see this? Wait, I got to show you this YouTube clip. You got to see this. So there's this horrible story up in Brooklyn, a group of girls ganging up on a 15-year-old, and the worst part of the story is not only was it done, but I heard today, the wrinkle I heard is that adults stood on chairs to have a better video of the event, rather than coming to the aid of a 15-year-old girl who was seriously hurt. So we'll get to definition in a minute, but, oh, I'm trying out the new clicker. But first, the why. If somebody had told me almost 14 years ago when I started doing work on bully prevention that I would become interested and engaged and do this for a long time, I would say, why? I'm not really so interested in bad behavior. I'm much more interested in good behavior. Do I really want to focus the highlight of all my research, my career, on bullying? But what I found out is that when we address bullying correctly and successfully, when as parents we think about the opposite of raising a bully, we have the opportunity to raise caring, empathetic, socially responsible children. So good bully prevention is good education. It's good parenting. It's good child development. These are some very important, on my personal soapbox. I don't know if you agree with me, but these are what I see as kind of critical components. That first, that I believe every child has the right to feel both safe and valued. That's just an eker. That's an essential part of what we're about, certainly as parents and as educators. The challenge, by the way, as parents is that when we say every child has the right to feel safe and valued, yeah, but what about that child who just beat up my child? I don't really want them to feel so safe right at this moment, right? So that's our challenge, is if we're going to embrace this, then we're going to have to think carefully, and we'll get to that later, about what we want for those children who are engaging in bullying. Secondly, that we as adults have the responsibility to contribute to the creation and the maintenance of the kinds of environments that allow all children to feel safe and valued. That we can't say, it's up to kids. I ran a workshop for educators a few days ago in Philadelphia, And one of the questions was, well, when the kids come to me at recess and say, you know, this one's bothering me or that one's bothering me, isn't it right, isn't it better for me to just say, go solve the problem by yourself? I said, only if you've taught them how to solve the problem. We don't tell children to go do calculus by themselves until we've taught them algebra and geometry and calculus. So as adults, we have to own our piece of the puzzle. And finally, I said this, bully prevention is a great vehicle for teaching other really important things. Now, it's okay. You can admit maybe you've had or even have some of these attitudes. But if you do, they get in the way of creating the kinds of communities where we eradicate, or I can't say eradicate because nobody eradicates bullying, we decrease bullying. Why do these attitudes interfere? Boys will be boys. I am the mother of 3 boys. I understand they cannot say good morning without making physical contact. I know that. However, that doesn't mean that we don't raise our boys to understand that you can use words and not hands. You know, that it is, even though your brother's breathing bothers you, you cannot tell him that he has to stop breathing, nor assist him in stopping his breathing. So we have to examine that attitude. Isn't this just part of childhood? Well, again, the sad answer is yes, it is. The best bully prevention programs in the United States and Australia and the UK and South Africa, the best programs achieve about a 30% reduction in bullying. Only in the Scandinavian countries do they get 50 to 70% reduction because their schools and their systems are very different. So they're able to do things in their schools that we are largely not able to do here. It just has to do with structure of school. But that means that, yeah, it is a part of childhood. However, the reason I think we have to challenge that attitude is because if we become hopeless or helpless and give up, then we don't intervene and we don't engage. And I think about, I'm looking around the room and you're all way too young. You're all way too young to have that mark on your arm from the smallpox vaccine. You're all looking at me like I'm crazy.
I know what you're talking about.
You do know, good. Okay, so you're not that young. Or I'm old enough to remember my mother's fears of polio. My mother lived in terrible fear of a child getting polio, and I'm not that old, but polio was still a disease that worried parents. Any of you worry about polio? It doesn't exist. But if people walked around saying, well, it's a part of childhood and we just have to deal with it, we would never have had the polio vaccine or eradicated smallpox. So I live for the day that I'm obsolete and that we have figured out the way to get rid of bullying, but we can't do it if we say it's just a part of childhood. He or she should just clobber the bully and that will end it. How many of you have seen an ad for various karate or different martial arts programs that say, send your child here, eliminate all bullying, give your child positive self-esteem, they'll never be bullied again. Again, halvai, I live to find the person who can eliminate all bullying. I will be very happy to hang up my bully prevention cap and hand it over to someone else. It doesn't work. And we'll talk about why, but very often telling a child who's being bullied to use physical aggression is going to result in more problems. First of all, we have Rabbi Menchel sitting here. In Har Torah, is it acceptable to hit another child?
Absolutely not.
And if they hit you first?
It's also not okay.
Okay. So why do you want to send your children to a school and tell them not to follow a school rule? It creates a great deal of dissonance, but even more important, usually bullied children are being bullied because of an imbalance of power. And we'll get to that in a moment. So if you tell a child who's less powerful to attempt aggression against a more powerful child, who's most likely to get hurt? Your less powerful child. So it's risky. Yeah.
I just have a question because you're mentioning aggression a lot, but bullying is not necessarily.
We'll get to that in a minute.
Aggression.
It is a form of aggression,
No,
but there are
I'm
three
saying-
different ways you can
I'm
be
saying-
aggressive. It doesn't
Right,
have to be
it could be
physical.
verbal.
Correct. We'll get to that in a minute. My child is all that matters, and I told my child to mind their own business. Hopefully by the end of tonight you'll understand why those attitudes interfere with making a difference in bullying. So now let's define it exactly. Thank you for bringing us to this point. There are 3 types of bullying defined by the way or the type of harm we cause, but all 3 have in common 3 characteristics. Bullying is the deliberate abuse of power to harm another person. I hate saying that definition because who wants to believe that children, darling, innocent children, deliberately abuse their power to cause harm to another person? But I'm the oldest of 3, and I can tell you that when it comes to my sister, I deliberately abuse my power to cause harm. And I still have to say, okay, every year for what I did as an older sister. It happens. Children do this. Now, 90% of the aggression that we see in children, whether it's verbal, physical, or social, is not bullying. Because it's not about causing harm, it's about getting what I want. So think about this example. Your child goes into the classroom or a computer lab at Har Torah, and all of the computers are busy. They're all being used by someone. And they approach a smaller child than them and say, hey, who told you you could have the computer for that long? I need it. Get off the computer. Is that bullying?
I think so. You're taking advantage of.
Actually, it is not bullying because I'm not doing it to harm that child. They're going to be harmed, but that's indirect. That's not my motive. I'm doing it because I need the computer. I want the computer.
But you're going to the younger child because you know that
I have more likelihood of getting the computer. I'm not going to go on, the big kid. It's bad behavior, and we have to deal with it. It's not appropriate.
It's survival of the fittest.
It's called instrumental aggression. I'm aggressing to get something. I'm not aggressing because I want to. Now, imagine this scenario. I walk into the computer room or to my classroom, and the only computer that's being used is by the smallest child in the class, the verbally quietest child in the class. There are 4 other empty computers that I could use. And I go over to that child and I say, who said you could use that computer for that long? I need the computer. Get off the computer. Now there's only one reason that I'm doing this. I'm deliberately abusing my power to cause harm. Now I'm bullying. It's about hurting. It's about the power. It's about demonstrating that I'm more powerful than you. It's not about getting a computer because there are 4 others there. So we have a tendency, parents, educators, even children, these days bullying is the term is so bandied about that we have a tendency to label everything as bullying. A lot of things are bad. A lot of things we need to tell our children that's not the right way. It's not nice. It's not ehrlich. It's not being chesedic, however you want to say it, but it isn't necessarily the formal definition of bullying. And why is the distinction important? Because in the first scenario, even if the solution to that scenario might be, let's figure out a system for taking turns on the computer. Or let's ask Rabbi Menschel, can we have 2 more computers in our classroom? That will solve the problem. But if it's the second scenario and it's about using my power to hurt someone, then it doesn't matter if you give me 1,000,000 computers. I'm still going to do it. So it changes a little bit how we're going to intervene as parents. The 3 types of bullying, physical, social, and emotional. Physical is obvious. It's also the least common. Emotional is the most common form of bullying, and it's the typical name-calling and teasing. Although over the years, I've seen different kinds of name-calling and teasing become more popular or less popular. So, depending on, I grew up at a time when, far out, cool, groovy were good words. And then I've lived through the evolution where things like that's fat, that's wicked, that is bad, are now good things. So the way that children use words changes over time, but it's using words. And the most least recognized but really important type of bullying to consider is social bullying. And that's limiting someone's ability to belong. It starts as early as nursery school and kindergarten, and it's with nursery and kindergarten children, it sounds like, we made a club. It's the blue club. You're in it, and you're in it. You're in it. You're not. Right? If you have young children, you hear it all the time. We made a club. No. With boys, as boys get older, where do boys do this? Sports. And they will, by the way, tell you all the time that I'm not excluding someone, it's just our team is full. I'm not excluding them, but we had 3 on our team. And I always challenge them and say, last I checked, the NBA is not doing a draft at the Har Torah recess. You can figure out how to play 4-on-4. You can, do rotations of 2-on-2. It doesn't have to be those teams. You can figure it out. Very often it's thinly veiled when boys say, well, but the teams were full. What they're really saying is that person wasn't a close enough friend to me to make room on the court to allow them in. Girls do it also socially all the time. Used to be, by the way, that the division was much more, boys used physical and emotional bullying and didn't use social bullying. Girls used social and emotional and didn't use physical. Just look at the McDonald's videotape. We've come a long way, baby. Girls are getting more physical, and guys, you've gotten in touch with your kinder, gentler side. And guys are now doing social bullying at about equal rates of girls. Okay, how many people in the room have heard that bullies bully because they have low self-esteem? Right? And by the way, if you watch Disney movies or read books for kids, you'll see this myth proliferated. If you leave here with nothing else tonight, you'll leave here knowing that low self-esteem is not the reason that bullies bully. We'll talk about why, perhaps why, but first I have to give you a caveat here, a caution. All of the research that I'm going to share with you, all of our knowledge about bullying doesn't come from your children. It doesn't come from Jewish day school children. It doesn't even come from children who bully on occasion. It comes from children who are at the very far ends of the spectrum. So you have to take this and realize virtually every child will at some point in their life act as a bully. Virtually every child will at some point in their life experience bullying. It doesn't mean that they have to fit this picture and these patterns. As a matter of fact, let's do a little experiment. Think about your childhood academic career from kindergarten through 12. Raise your hand if in all of those years you were never teased, harassed, or left out on purpose. Okay, good, we're normal. Nobody's hands up. All of us were at some point in time a victim. It doesn't mean that the characteristics of victims apply to you. They apply more to those children who are persistently in this role. Bullies are aggressive. When I use the word aggressive, remember they could be verbally aggressive, physically aggressive, or socially aggressive. What do I mean by socially aggressive? Socially aggressive is the girl who 2 minutes after Shabbos is over is dialing on her cell phone saying, okay, Shira, well, don't tell Jennifer that Jessica is going to meet us at the mall, but I don't want to go to the mall. We're going to, instead, we're going to go bowling, but don't tell Meira and Devora because we don't want them to come. And make sure you tell this one first. That's a socially aggressive girl. It's a take charge. Now, is that always a bad thing? I do workshops with kids all the time, and I say, none of these characteristics are bad when they're used for good. If you're a socially aggressive person who uses that to organize everybody into a chesed project or to get everybody to do a fun activity together, great. But if your social aggression leaves people out, or you use your power to exclude people, then it can be problematic. What is the, bullies have average self-esteem, average intelligence, average no signs of anxiety or depression. Their deficit area is empathy. Empathy is the ability to take the perspective to feel the pain of another person. And we, in fact, are actually wired. We have something called mirror neurons in our brain. They allow us to feel the way others feel. But just like everything else that our brains do, some of us have brains that do it better than others. I do not have a math brain. I am not allowed in my family to add, multiply, subtract, or divide without a calculator. It's dangerous. Do not expect me to balance a checkbook without a calculator. It's really dangerous. I don't have a good math brain. I have 3 sons. One of them is a born empath. If you so much as look tired, can I get you some tea? You don't feel well, I'll do the dishes. I'll clear the table. One of the others, you could be carrying 27 grocery bags, trying to kick open a door, and he would say, could you get these 2 Legos apart? They're stuck. No sense of what's going on around him other than him. Of course, we are all born non-empathic. We are born totally self-focused. An infant does not say, feed me when you have a chance, I know you're busy. You know, the wet diaper, it's okay when you get to it. You have other kids who need you. So we're born, give me, get me, take care of me. We help our children develop their empathy muscles and see beyond themselves and take the perspective of others, as well as their brain develops the ability. Piaget studied this years ago about the fact that very young children believe that everybody sees the world exactly as they do. Cognitively, they just don't have the brain power yet. But as they grow, they develop that ability. But we develop it in levels, so we have some children who are very good at it and others who are not. Bullies seem not to recognize the pain of others, not to feel it the same way that other children do. Yeah.
Is it when they're younger, if they're doing activities that sort of tamp down that, like video games and stuff
We
like
don't
that? Does that
know.
make a difference?
We really don't know because it's only relatively recently that there's cutting-edge, amazing research that if there's time, I'll tell you about later, on the neurology of empathy, on really what happens in the brain, but all of that's done on adults. So it's done after the fact, and we don't know chicken or egg. If we see an adult who is a lifelong bully and is chronically aggressive and their brain looks different than others and doesn't register empathy, is that because they've been bullying for years? Or did they become a bully because they didn't have that ability? So we don't have the answer to that question in a really good way yet. We do have research that suggests that, you know, aggressive video games do promote some increase in aggression. They're not ideal,
But not a lack of empathy necessarily.
but not necessarily a lack of empathy. Although, you know, for young children, there's a different issue, and that's the ability to know what's real and what's not real. So they can see things. If you see a video, typical video game, you know, when my kids were little, they would say, and even we didn't play violent games, but the language of the game was still, I have 3 lives left. I lost my lives. And then, oh, I got 4 more lives. So for a young child, that concept of lives get renewed is totally the antithesis of reality. If you watch a TV show and you see an actor bloody and killed, but then you see them the next day in a different show and they're walking around just fine, young children can't necessarily, very young children, can't necessarily understand that, wait a minute, those things are real and permanent when they happen in real life. That was fake. Okay, we'll get to that if we can. So the important thing about intervening with bullies is that if you are the parent of an aggressive child, whether it's bullying or other kinds of aggression, what's really important is to work on building empathy. And empathy is a teachable skill. Again, some are natural, some take more teaching, but we have to say, how do you think your brother feels when you do X? Now, by the way, if you say, how do you think your sister likes it when you grab her doll, what kind of answer do you get? I don't care. I don't care. She's being a baby. You know, you're not, in the moment is not the time to build empathy. The moment that you're dealing with negative behavior or disciplining, that's not the time to build empathy. One of the best ways to build empathy is indirectly, books, TV shows, movies, videos, because there, when you ask your child, why do you think the man in the yellow hat is so mad at Curious George? How can you tell he's mad? Where do you see it in his body? How do you notice that? That's very safe. I'm not going to be defensive. I'm not getting punished if I admit that Curious George wasn't supposed to eat 4 ice cream cones. I'm just talking about a book. And if you think, oh, Dr. Novick, that example is for like a 3-year-old, do book clubs with your older children. Read with them before they go to bed, whether it's Harry Potter or the Hunger Games or whatever level they're reading at, or sit and watch, you know, I hate saying this, but like sit and watch their, you know, preteen TV show that they like and ask questions. Why did that character act that way? How did this character make that character feel? All of that builds empathy. And then in a very sneaky way, once you've had those discussions, you can say, has that ever happened to you? Does anybody in your school ever make people feel like that? Would you ever make somebody feel like that? Would you, you know, then you can kind of get it in, but in a quiet moment, not when you're disciplining. Keep in mind that we are models for our children 24/7, 365 days a year, and most children who use bullying or aggressive means to get what they want have seen it work for other people. So that means if we bully the dry cleaner or the waiter or our neighbor or our spouse in front of our child, that we can't expect that they are not going to use the same strategies that we use to get the things that we want. So we have to realize that our children are watching whether we know it or not. Okay, victims. So victims, it's interesting because you would think, and if I asked you, what's a characteristic of a victim? You might say, oh, they're the freckled-faced kid, or the kid who wears glasses, or someone with braces, or they're the really short kids, or they're really tall kids. But in fact, the research does not bear out that there's any physical characteristic, save one, that identifies children as victims. Any physical characteristic. There is a personality characteristic, and that's that they react. Because if we go back to the definition of bullying, it's about power. It's about showing that I can make you cry or make you upset. So who's the likely victim? The child who cries. Now, you probably can't tell this, but on a good day, I'm 5 feet tall. That's all. 5 feet tall. I'm wearing heels. 5 feet tall. That is it. And I went to school when it was so politically incorrect that everything we did in school, we did in size order. We sang in size order. We went to lunch in size order. We sat in rows in size order. We lined up in size order. We graduated in size order. Everything. I was number 2. My entire academic career, Suzanne was shorter than me. And I come from a relatively short family that believes that good things come in small packages. So you could call me midget, munchkin, dwarf, anything that you wanted, peanut, and I just laughed it off. But if you so much as mention Suzanne's diminutive size to her, she would run crying out of the classroom. Who got teased? Suzanne. That doesn't mean I never got called munchkin, dwarf, peanut. I did. But it didn't stick, it didn't last because it didn't get to me. Now, anyone who is blessed with a reactive child, an emotionally reactive child, knows that telling them to just, stiff upper lip and don't let it bother you is like telling me to grow. It's a biological impossibility. It's not going to work. This is a temperamental factor. Can children learn to overcome it? Learn to moderate it. Maturity helps a lot. Learning acting, believe it or not, learning that the way you feel inside doesn't have to be how you show on the outside. I'm not telling you to change how you feel inside, but did you ever play a part in a school play where you had to act like somebody else? You can act like somebody else in that moment. You can still hold on to your horrible feelings inside, but act differently. On the outside, yeah.
I was involved in a coaching course. I was always involved with PAL and AAU coaching around the country. And one of the things that we were taught in the course, there was he played Division I basketball, was drafted in the first round of the NBA. And he said that one of the things that you have to watch for is that a lot of times these kids who are involved in being, quote, bullies, are victims of child abuse at home.
Actually, that's not supported in the research at all. It's very interesting. The children who are bullies may very well be in a home where there's abuse, but usually they're not the victim. Unfortunately, children, unless you're talking about in adulthood, but in childhood, children who are victims of abuse tend to become they try to be invisible. If you go to a victim of abuse, a child, and you just try to give them a gentle touch, they'll flinch. They live their life scared. Now, if they're growing up in a house where they're watching abuse happen, but not to them, it's different. So that may moderate what this gentleman was saying to you. But it's another one of those myths that I think part of it comes from really wanting to think the best of bullies, which is a good thing. We don't want to believe that there are people in the world who deliberately use their power to cause harm to others. We don't want to believe that. We certainly don't want to believe it of children, but as much as I'd like not to believe that, I'm a realist. Hitler exists, ISIS exists. We live in a world where there are people who deliberately abuse their power to harm others, and even children And to me, the most generous way to think about bullies is to think about them as having a blind spot, an empathy blind spot. Because the way I think about it is, if you don't feel another person's pain, if you don't really feel that yourself, then of course I'll cause you pain. What's the difference? I'm not feeling it. Most of us, if you think about it, think about the last time you caused someone pain. Usually inadvertently. Most of us don't do it on purpose. But you said something that was read, it feels terrible to us because we feel that person's pain. We don't like it. We don't want to make people feel that way. I think bullies, it doesn't resonate with them. And so they're handicapped. And we need to help them over that handicap by providing them with the skill that they're missing. Now, just one other thing in terms of, if you have bullying in your house between older and younger siblings, and everything that I'm saying is different in families than it is in schools because the sibling dynamics are different. But if you have an older sibling bullying a younger sibling where there's a power imbalance, that you are going to have to discipline. You are going to have to say, you can't beat up your younger sister, or you can't grab that from your baby brother. Those aren't the moments that you can use empathy. Those are the moments where you have to resort on, in our house, you're not allowed to hit. In our house, because while you're teaching that empathy skill, you still need to have rules. You still need to be the boss and be in charge. Okay?
Can you tell them no bullying? Can you use the word bullying or not? I
tend not to use it with siblings. I just tend not to use it with siblings. Sibling dynamics are very different, and I don't know that it's really, really bullying. I do know, by the way, that what will make sibling dynamics worse is favoritism. So if there's favoritism played in a family, and interestingly, the research says particularly favoritism by dad. If dad has a favorite, that is a wedge in sibling rivalry that will make things much worse.
I think it's good that there's some research that blames the dad.
Isn't that nice, Mom? Thank you. Shame on you, men. We women finally didn't get blamed for something. I like that. Okay. The other thing to keep in mind, by the way, about telling victims, don't react, don't do anything, just ignore it, is that very often when a victim who has been a victim of a bully for a while ignores it, what does the bully do? They escalate. They say, well, I always got Rona to cry when I called her shrimp. That's not working. Now let me hold her lunch up here. That's not working. Now let me put all her books on the top shelf so she can't get them. What do I have to do to get her to cry? So unless you have your child who's being a victim has really the strength and fortitude to wait and wait and wait and wait through all that escalation, it's really hard to tell them to do nothing. I just want to make mention of another class of victims. They're called provocative victims. And it's sometimes they're called aggressive victims, sometimes they're called bully victims. These are children who, when they are bullied, are just as likely to react with aggression as with being emotionally upset. So half the time they might cry, and half the time they may hit. And the reason I mention them is they're very puzzling to parents and to educators, because these are the children who on Monday are coming home saying, somebody sees me, and on Tuesday they're coming home saying, I was in Rabbi Menschel's office because I got in trouble. And on Wednesday, somebody didn't let me play. And on Thursday, I was in Rabbi Menschel's office again because I got in trouble. Because half the time they're being the aggressor in response to being provoked, and half the time they're being the victim. And very often what happens when they're the aggressor is if the bully happened to be a smart, savvy bully. And when no one was looking at recess, not that it ever happens in Har Torah, that no one was looking, but it happened to be that a teacher was engaged with one set of, and somewhere off in a corner, the bully very quietly under their breath said, moron. And the teacher didn't hear that, but your child turned to the bully and said, oh yeah, well you're a total loser, idiot. What does the teacher say? The teacher only sees your child looking like the bully, so they get in trouble in that moment because we don't always see the whole picture. A lot of bullying is witnessed, but it's not witnessed by us. I'll come back to technology in a minute. Most of us have children who are neither bullies nor victims in a persistent way. But all of our children are bystanders, probably every day, at least once a week. They're watching these social dynamics unfold. And believe it or not, they have the most pivotal role to play and the most power in what kind of school Har Torah is, in what kind of community you live in what kind of house you have. The children create the social culture, and what the bystanders do changes everything. Imagine if at McDonald's, when one girl attacked another, a swarm of bystanders said, "Are you crazy?" And instead of taking out their cell phones to take pictures, called 911 and said, "Either you leave her alone or the police will be here in 2 minutes." Would have changed the course of events. We know that bystanders make a huge difference. Yeah.
I have a little bit of, this is, in my mind, the correct way, but I feel like we've become very, very, very sensitive to physically hurting someone. That, like in the beginning of the year, my son witnessed at recess a bunch of kids piling on a kid. And he was just there, and then everyone said he was there, so he got called to the office. But whatever it was, I told my son, when you see your friend getting hurt, try to help them somehow.
Right. So we'll get to that in a minute, because the issue is the somehow.
No, I know, the somehow.
Right.
So I said, try to help your friend. I guess I didn't
Right.
address it properly, and then the next time something like that happened again, and he went in to pull the friend out of the action, he got in trouble.
Right. Right.
So, like, it's
when I
it's a very
work
sensitive
with
spot.
children, and the same is true with parents, I always say there is 99% of the time a strategy that you can use that is going to keep you safe as well as make a positive difference. If it's a strategy that's not going to keep you safe and make a positive difference, reject that one and go on to the next one. I'm not asking anybody here. I mean, we have stories in our lifetimes of heroes, the man who jumped onto the tracks to rescue the guy who fell, left his kids on the side. I don't think I would have the wherewithal to do that. I'm not asking that of kids. Don't put yourself at risk, but there's almost always something to do. The problem is, and it says it on this slide, 85% of all bullying is witnessed, but most bystanders, when they witness it, do nothing. And they do nothing because they're afraid I'm going to be the next victim. I'm afraid I'm going to get hurt. I'm afraid that, or it doesn't feel nice or right to go up to the bully and say, "Stop that, don't do that to my friend." And they don't know what else to do. Yes?
I think also, though, with the bystander issues, when you talk about social bullying, that besides the fear of becoming a victim, there's also, especially for the kids in 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and they're at that age, that they want to have a certain social status, and they don't want a change in that social
Right,
status.
so that's
for
the same,
themselves.
that's the same as the fear of becoming the victim. In other words, if the victim is being iced out, and if I help that victim, I'll have the equivalent of social cooties, and I won't be allowed in, and it won't be good for me. It's one of my favorite things to do with middle school kids is to challenge them about this issue, because I ask them all the time, I really don't get it. I don't understand popularity. There's actually a symposium on Monday at the university of the leading researchers on popularity are coming. I can't wait to hear their talk, because, like, is there a system? Do you all call each other in the morning and decide who the cool kids are? Like, how do you decide that? And like, do you take a vote? Do you vote someone off the island? Like, how does it happen? And I will tell you that I started doing something, I have a very small practice, but in my office, I started doing something with every middle school age child I see. I asked them to draw me a picture of how people go together in their class. And they all invariably draw circles. They say, okay, there's this circle, and there's this circle, and they all invariably identify one circle as the in or cool circle. And I say, well, who makes it? Do you elect people to that job? Do they sit in the cool seats, give them coolness? Like, what? We don't know. It just happened that way. And I think we have to challenge groups of kids and say, they're the cool kids because you let them be the cool kids.
They're the ones with a lot of self-confidence, I always found.
Sometimes.
Actually, my son brought to my attention that he thought that the cool kids were the ones that were actually being bad, being the bullies.
Yeah.
And he asked me, why is it cool to be bad?
Right,
And
so
I don't know how to.
the researchers on, this is one thing you can tell your children. The researchers on popularity have identified that there is a difference between being popular and being liked. popular children are not necessarily likable or liked. I want to raise children who are liked. I don't care if you're popular, but I want you to be likable, and I want you to be liked. And don't you want to be likable and liked? So being popular, it's not all it's, cracked up to be. Not that our kids are going to hear that from us, but, we can.
Well, isn't it being popular, that's the person that everyone wants to be, right? Everyone's envious of everyone wants to be that person. I think. So
No.
Then you're liked.
They're not liked. They're not liked. The popular children are not liked.
Other kids are
People feel it's important.
They don't wanna be
People feel it's important to,
They
people
just wanna
feel it's important to be around them, it's important to be near them, it's important to have them give you the nod, but they are not liked.
Aren't they
They're
liked
maybe
in
perhaps a
their
little more
household?
feared than liked, but they're not liked. Let me just talk about these social psychology phenomena because they act on all our children and they make this harder, and then I want to talk about strategies. So dilution of responsibility. When more people are in a group and watch something, we're each less likely to act. If any one of us were alone in McDonald's and saw that happen, we might have called the police. But if you're there with a group of people and one person starts taking a picture of another, nobody, you walk past garbage on the street, you say, well, he walked past, she walked past, why should I pick that up? Not my job. It's the not my job phenomena. It's not my job, no one else is doing it, why should I be the one who does it? Again, in the spirit of, every child needs to feel safe and valued, I think we need to raise children who believe. We need to be adults who believe it is all our jobs if someone is being hurt. It is all our jobs. You were saying it to your son, daughter, son. It is all our jobs if we see somebody in need to come to their aid. There is no more Jewish precept. Al tamod al dam reacha. We have to act. We have to do tikkun olam. We have to think about the other. We are forbidden to say, it's not my job, let somebody else do it. There's Gemara and Halacha and Torah endlessly teaching us that this is the essence of who we are as a people, as individuals, as a nation, that we have to act. We can't be people who say it's somebody else's job.
How do we teach our kids to do, to act this way?
I'll give you, one of the ways you teach them is, first of all, you teach them we have to. Second of all, you teach them in our family, we. I'll just give you an example. When my son was at, Har Torah, it happened to be that the year my son was born, there was an inordinate number of boys born. I don't know what was in the water, but we were going to bris him every single 2 days, and that meant bar mitzvah season was hairy, right? A gazillion bar mitzvahs happened just week after week after week after week. Before we got to bar mitzvah season, we sat our son down and we said, listen, this is what we do in our family. When we get an invitation, we go. We are misameach the balei simcha. We try to make them happy. We dance with them. We wish them a mazel tov. To every simcha we are invited, we go. Unless we have a conflict, we're out of town, we can't be there. But we don't look at an invitation and say, I don't like the caterer. Oh my gosh, another simcha there with the same balloon man, the same one-man band, the same little hot dogs and blankets. I'm not going. We don't do that. And we said that long before the invitations started coming. And don't you know that when the invitations started coming, even our very sweet, kind-hearted son would sometimes say, do I have to go to this one? It's the balloon guy again. And I'm not so friendly with this one. And every single time we said, what do you want when it's your bar mitzvah? Do you want people to look and say, oh, one-man band, it's not a DJ. Oh, it's not the... No. Your job at a simcha is to go to the simcha. So you create your family rules and you teach them to your children and teach them this paradigm that we help other people. We don't stand idly by when someone is suffering. We give aid. Then you have to give strategies, and I'll get to strategies in a minute because of these problems. Hold your question for a minute, okay? The other strategy is power to conform. If I walk into the lunchroom, and there's a row of women here, so if I walk into the lunchroom and I want to sit at this table, and the first woman sees me coming, the first third grade girl sees me coming and says, ew, it's Rona. And the second third grade girl says, Rona always has stinky lunches. And the third girl says, Rona eats loud. And the fourth girl says, I don't want Rona at our table. She always sits here. What strength of character does it take for girl number 5 to say, But Rona doesn't have any place else to sit. But Rona's nice. Come on, let's let Rona sit. Now, by the way, Solomon Ash was doing this experiment, this exact experiment, not about who sits with you at the lunch table and Rona having stinky lunches. He was doing it about conformity, because he didn't understand how the Nazis were so successful in getting the German people to buy their propaganda. And what he found was that 30% of the time, adult human beings will say in seat number 5 the wrong answer that they know is wrong to a simple perception problem, just because 4 people before them gave the wrong answer. One dissenting voice. One person who says, they don't even have to say the right answer, but they could say, oh, I don't know. I don't really know Rona so well. I don't know why you're so upset about her sitting here. One dissenting voice changes the dynamic and greatly reduces the conformity phenomena. So we have to realize that giving our children the skill to be their own voice and a leader rather than a follower starts very young. It's way too late to teach them to deal with peer pressure when they're in high school. We give them the skills when they're younger, they're much better off. They're much more likelihood that they're going to say no to all the substances and activities we want them to say no to. When someone says, hey, try this, it's good. It'll give you a real high. Much more likely that when somebody says, come on, get in the car, I haven't had too much to drink, that they will be the leader and not the follower who says, you know what, give me your car keys, you're not driving. We need to give them that skill, that voice when they're young. We need to tell them, we know this happens. Tell me, literally, you have to say to your kids, tell me what you're going to say. What are the words you're going to use when 4, 5, 6 people say, don't go help them out, you're going to get hurt. What are you going to say to be the leader instead of the follower? Because if we don't have them practice the words and know what they're going to say, they're not going to do it. And the last thing is dehumanization. We know that if we witness somebody being abused, victimized over and over and over again, we begin to think that they deserve it. We begin to think it's their fault. This is what the Nazis did in the prison camps. It's how they created a situation where human beings could treat other human beings in such a horrific way. You know, lahavdil, we don't have that in our schools, but we have children who've become invisible because they've been excluded for so long that our children just say, oh, he's the one who doesn't play. Oh, she's the one we don't ask to come to our table. And we have to challenge those ideas and say, well, but why don't we ask them? Why don't we ask? I asked them in 3rd grade. It's now 8th. I don't have to ask her to sit with me. I asked her in 3rd grade. Well, ask again. Let's try again. So the typical peer responses to bullying are, they're there in the order in which they happen, are to do nothing or to laugh or join in. Less common, but it happens also, is to spread rumors about it happening or act as a lookout. And I'll get to you in a second. But what we want to do is we want to give students, children, other strategies. And unfortunately, below 3rd grade, if I go into any class in Har Torah and I ask them, what's the right thing to do when you see bullying happen? They will tell me 2 great answers. Do you know what they are? Tell a grown-up, tell the bully to stop. In 3rd grade, below 3rd grade, they will, I'm sure if I go into any classroom, they will tell me that. They probably do tell a grown-up. They probably don't tell the bully to stop.
But do they recognize what bullying is all the time?
Whatever. If I don't even use the word bullying, I say, you see 2 children, one is teasing another in the hallway. What's the right thing to do? They'll tell me, go tell a grown-up or tell the teaser to stop. They all know the right answer. Above 3rd grade, if I ask them what's the right thing to do, we're down to 1 because they no longer want to tell grown-ups. It's considered inappropriate, it's tattling, it's grown-ups aren't so smart anymore after you're a 3rd grader. You're much smarter than they are. So we're down to 1 strategy, which is tell a bully. Now, I can honestly tell you that I cannot remember a time in my very much longer than children's lives that I have directly told a bully to stop bullying. And I'm the bully prevention expert. I don't think I've ever done it. So I have other strategies. One of my favorite strategies is support the victim. Ignore the bully. Have nothing to do with the bully. Have nothing to do with aggression. I don't like aggression and conflict. Support the victim. Here's one of my favorite stories. I'm on an airplane with my children. We're making our final approach. Please fasten your seatbelts, trays, beds, seat backs, you know, that thing. And right across from where we're sitting, a woman who I think had had much too much happy hour on the plane is giving the stewardess a really hard time. What, do I have to put my seat back up? I don't understand. I'm relaxing. Don't give me a hard time. And I wasn't going to unbuckle my seatbelt to go help an unruly passenger with the stewardess. But I also felt my children are watching me watch this. And the stewardess is watching me watch this. So when the stewardess came past our aisle, all I said was, whatever they pay you, it isn't enough. She said, oh, thank you. Because what bullying does is it takes power away from the victim. So the victim feels powerless, feels dehumanized, feels unrecognized. And I made a statement that said to the stewardess and to my children that I value you as a human being. I'm not going to stand by and let you be treated in that way. No risk to me. And I made a difference. I think I made a difference. My other favorite strategy happens all the time when I'm shopping and I see either one sibling bullying another, or often it's a grown-up being abusive to their child. You know, there's a little girl in the cart and the parent is engaged in the following monologue. There's no way I'm getting you that lollipop after how you acted today. You're disgusting. I can't believe you're doing this. You know, you just, every single time we go shopping, you make me crazy. I promised you a lollipop if you were good. Why can't you be good? Okay, I'm a licensed child psychologist. I know this isn't good parenting, but this is also New York. Am I going to say to this bullying parent, that really isn't appropriate, please stop right now? That doesn't feel very safe to me. So I use my favorite strategy, it's distraction. What's my distraction? Works every single time. I look at the little girl and I pick some darling characteristic and I say, where does she get those curls? Oh my gosh, those are the most adorable curls I've ever seen. I mean, I'd have to spend 6 days, you know, in the beauty parlor to get hair like that. And what happens? The mother says, oh, I know, my side of the family. We all have that natural curly, wavy look. And it changes the dynamic. And if I don't feel I can do it with the mother, then I'll play peekaboo with the girl. I'll do something to distract either the bully or the victim. It's such a great strategy to use distraction. Kids can do it so easily. You walk in the hall, you see teaser, teasing somebody. You don't have to say, excuse me, but Dr. Novick says teasing is not empathic and you really shouldn't do it. All you have to do is say, you think the Rangers have a shot? You've changed the dynamic. You may have stopped the teasing in that moment. And you can distract either the bully or the victim. If it's a girl, it's probably not going to be about the Rangers. It'll be about, you know, your headband or your shoes. Yeah.
Isn't that just like a Band-Aid solution?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But guess what? It turns out that the Band-Aid solutions matter. Because if we think about in every single instance that bullying happens, the bullying is taking the social temperature. Is this an environment where what I'm doing goes unchecked and unfettered? Or does somebody derail it? Is this an environment where I can make you feel like this big? Or does somebody come along and change that? And so it is a Band-Aid, but it turns out that the Band-Aids matter because if I do nothing, if I see one peer teasing another in the hallway and I walk by, that the message I've sent to the bully is, you got license here, green light, go ahead. Bully. That's the way people talk here in Har Torah. You could do it, nobody's going to bother you. But if I distract, the bully is getting a subtle message that, hey, every time, you know, and after a while, by the way, it will sink in that every time they're talking about the Rangers, you know, like, I can't really get in a good, you know, shtuch here before somebody, you know. And I think even more important, what message has the victim gotten? Somebody will come to my aid. I'm not alone here. Now, even more important than what peers do in those kinds of situations is what we do. How many people here drive a carpool from time to time? Okay? Has it ever happened to you when you're driving carpool that there are some inappropriate phrases or teases or things going on in the car that you don't really approve of? Yeah. If you keep on driving your car and don't say anything and don't mark it at all, children read non-response as approval. So I drove lots of carpools, and I would say, gentlemen, you don't have to be serious, and you don't have to be, say, I'm stopping the car and you're walking home. I would say, gentlemen, you're hurting Mrs. Novick's sensitive ears with that language. Could you please talk to each other in a different way, just so they knew I heard it and I don't like it. If you don't go on record as saying, it's not okay, then they think it is. So we have to be really, really careful about communicating. Did I kind of answer you in terms of strategies?
Yeah, I don't know if it's the whole thing that you don't understand the populism, because as shallow as it sounds, sometimes a parent doesn't want the child to become the loser that interferes, or because it does happen. Sometimes when you're the one defending the one getting bullied, people will throw you on the side also. They're like,
right, so it's not a matter, don't think about it as defending. Think about it as, I have an array of strategies. And by the way, one of the strategies is to tell an adult. And I think for older kids, we have to teach them over and over and over again that not only is it not lashon hara, but it's also a chiyuv, that we have a rabbinic obligation if we see someone suffering to talk about it to somebody who can help. We also have to educate children that when they tell us, or tell educators, they also have to tell us what they want and what they don't want. It's a lot of times, by the way, children are not telling us because they do not want you showing up at recess saying, would everybody please be nice to Rona today? I heard you were mean to her. I'm going to stand here and watch until I see that you let her play. And Rona's an 8th grader, right? Kiss of death. They don't want that to happen. So we have to tell them, you could tell us about it, and the telling may serve for us to problem solve together. In one of the first schools I ever did bully prevention with, the social worker told me the first year that we did a program with the 6th graders, the knocks came on the door, and the knock said, Mrs. Wertheimer, so-and-so is bullying me. Those were the only knocks that she got, were victims coming and complaining. By the end of the first year, the knocks were, Mrs. Wertheimer, so-and-so is bullying someone else. So it was now bystanders reporting. By the second year of the program, the knocks were, Mrs. Wertheimer, I want to know what I can do about the bullying I'm watching. I want you to help me come up with strategies. It takes time until kids get to a place where they're ready to make a difference themselves, but I think we have to empower them and let them know that really a lot of this is, we can't change it. I mean, Rabbi Menschel cannot walk around and say, no more cool kids, no more, not allowed. Mrs. Feinberg, Dr. Feinberg can't say, I heard about, different social groups, stop it. Just all be friends. We can't do that. The other thing, by the way, is that we do have to make the distinction. I've done a lot of work, particularly with girls and girls' schools, around the issue of not everybody needs to be best friends with everybody else. And what is a friend and what is not a friend? In other words, a friend is not the person who mandates who you can and cannot be friends with. That's not friendship. That's dictatorship. That's not friendship. That's beyond the boundaries of friendship. But girls have to be educated about that, and they have to really be helped in groups to understand what friendship is and what friendship isn't. Yeah.
What do you tell your child when they tell you, well, I told the teacher, but she doesn't care and she doesn't do anything?
So what I tell children, first of all, I don't believe everything my children tell me. So one thing that I recommend, if your child routinely tells you, is before you accept what your child tells you as the absolute and full truth, do your due diligence and find out it may be that something was done. The other thing is, when it comes to social interactions, just as I said, it's absurd for mommy to go out and say, I'm standing here till everyone's nice. It is possible that something was done about it, but your child doesn't know.
Right, but if they don't know, then they still don't feel safe.
Right, so we can help them by saying, sometimes teachers are doing a lot, but they don't want you to. I mean, imagine if your teacher went outside, took you in the, by the arm and said, this Miss Ken, this poor little child is not having a good time here at Hartorah. Please be nice to him or her. Also, it's terrible. So we have to sometimes help children know that there may be lots of things that a teacher is doing behind the scenes that you don't know about. But the other thing I also tell children is, not every adult is the right adult for every problem. You know, I don't call a plumber to do my gardening. If you don't get the right adult to help you with a problem, Heart Torah is filled with lots of really great adults. And there may be other adults that we have to use. The other thing is that I find that sometimes children are overusing adults, sometimes they're underusing adults, and sometimes, again, they're not saying what they want. So they just have to be better advocates of saying, Mora or Rebbe, this happened, and could I have, or would you help me with, or I would like this not to happen anymore, so that the teacher knows what to do about it. There is a lot of research on what makes successful bully prevention in schools, but as I said before, it's very complex, and even a wonderful school like Heart Torah, even schools that have all the right policies, procedures in place, they're not going to eliminate every incidence of bullying. It's going to happen. So, you know, do not walk out tonight and say, well, they've got to get a better program, or they've got to do. Every school needs to do more, but every school is also doing an enormous amount to address this issue. Okay, that's it. Other than I'll take your questions in a minute. The clip there is a video that I highly recommend. There's a series on YouTube that is called Kids React. And kids react to different news stories. So they did a Kids React to Bullying. If you Google, you can either use my my link there, or you can just go on YouTube and do Kids React to Bullying. And the reason that I think it's amazing is it's kids talking to us, adults, and revealing to us how good and bad a job we're doing on this stuff. And it's really quite amazing. One of the things, and I said I'd go back to technological amplification here, one of the things that's really telling is how they talk about cyberbullying and the use of technology to bully, and our failure as adults to adequately supervise their cyber lives. Cyberbullying or technobullying is bullying on steroids. Because if you think bullying has an impact, just imagine that impact magnified thousands-fold by the number of people you can reach, the rapidity with which you can reach those people, and the permanence of whatever you do, and the anonymity that the technology affords. So I urge you to have conversations with your children about who they are, what their persona is in the digital world as well as in the real world. And we think they are much smarter than us digitally. I mean, I know every time I get a phone, one of my kids has to tell me how to use it. You know I need them to do all kinds of stuff, but they are digitally stupid. I'll give you two examples. A 6th grade girl who was about to have criminal charges brought against her for stalking and harassing a peer by sending over 300 text messages an hour to a peer. This very bright honor student, 6th grade girl, tells me, they have nothing on me, I deleted them. And has no concept that her parents' cell phone bill has thousands of pages of evidence of every text message she sent. It doesn't have content, but it shows that she made the texts. I took them off the phone. So that's example one. And example two was at a Jewish day school in another community where the students were being cyber-stalked on the schools. Somebody had hacked into the schools. I don't know whether you use an online homework system, or do parent
locker.
So they have one for the students, can check their homework. It's a middle school. And somebody was stalking the students, and the students all said, oh, well, we figured out who it is, and we arranged to meet him. Oh, my God. Again, this is a high-level, posh Jewish day school, really smart kids. And they think they're just, well, we figured out who it is. We're going to go meet this person. We arranged a meeting. Like, they're not smart enough to understand the damages and implications of what they do in the cyber world. I always like to end with and then I'll take your questions, with something that a 6th grade student taught me. At the end of one of the first years of doing workshops with kids, a teacher said, who would like to give Dr. Novick some feedback about what we learned together? And a 6th grade, girl raised her hand and said, Dr. Novick, after the workshops, I went home and I told my mother I can't listen to her anymore. I said, oh my gosh, I'll never work again. But she went on to say, because my mother always told me, remember those attitudes? If you see trouble, stay away from trouble. But I realized after doing these workshops that if I have a friend who's in trouble and I stay away, what kind of friend am I? And you know, Dr. Novick, if I see a human being in trouble and I stay away, what kind of human being am I? When we teach our children to be empathic, socially responsible citizens of the world, we put those words in their minds and in their hearts. And we raise the next generation of children who are going to care for us and care for our communities and care for their world in a real and genuine way. So thank you all so much for your attention tonight. Comments, questions, things I didn't get to. Yeah.
One thing, what if like you see your child being bullied and they don't realize it necessarily? Like how can you bring it up and like how do you make them more powerful? Sometimes they don't like, let's say they're really good, like they're very strong about it, and like you just want to like re-encourage it or like teach them better strategies.
What you're describing is often the kind of being taken advantage of situation. You know, you have a good-natured, competent child who everybody says, oh, can I borrow your homework? Can I borrow your pen? Do you have extra money for lunch? You have it? And they'll readily give it, and they don't realize that they're being taken advantage of. And, you know, the hard realities of life are that we sometimes have to educate our children to the dangers of being too nice and too giving and having to make distinctions and stand up for oneself. No, we don't want you to get cruel, and we don't. I'm thinking of the Berenstain Bears. One of the Berenstain Bears books is about, you know, most of the apples in the barrel are good apples, but every once in a while you get an apple that's rotten. You know, sometimes, mostly people's motives are real and genuine, but not always, and we have to be wise about, you know, who we say yes to and who we say no to and how often we do things for other people. You know, you also can sometimes make it, you know, for a child who's really kind-hearted and nice, you can say, it's not always so nice to do everything for everyone, because then they don't get their chance to grow up. Then they don't learn to be responsible and do their own homework and do, you know, all those kind of things. So we have to help them navigate through it.
Is there one more question?
Yeah.
Like of all the things that you said, like what would you say is the best strategy to teach the kids, like for when they come home and said, this person teased me today? Do you say act, like you mentioned, or do you say something else that would really like give them like, okay, I'll do this from now on? What do you
so I think that every situation requires some different strategies. There are, you know, humor is a wonderful deflector. It's a wonderful distractor. So again, I share all these stories, and now like people know my children professionally, and I'm still telling the stories of them. But when my oldest son was in middle school, he found himself dangled by his ankles over a garbage pail in the lunchroom. You know, garbage pail filled with slop from lunch.
Not the one that went to the school.
He did not go to the school. No. The school didn't exist. Well, it existed, but not here. Dangled by his ankles, and my son, God bless him, had my height in middle school, which means he wasn't from the Giants, but he also had my mouth in middle school, and my sense of humor. And so as he was upside down, he said, Novick, you're doing this to Novick? Now go get a Sobolewski over there. The biggest, brawniest kid. Now that would be an accomplishment. They immediately put my son down and never bothered him again because he didn't look bothered by it. He used his humor, which he's very good at, and his big mouth, which got him into a lot of trouble in middle school when he wasn't hanging over the garbage can. So if you can give your child the tagline, the humorous line, one girl who knew that her sense of style wasn't great. She knew it. And she wasn't so good at humor, but she kind of developed a couple of, yes, I know, my mother thinks that Kmart is high fashion. You know, a couple of self-deprecating, diversionary tactics. It takes all the wind out of the sail of someone teasing you if you say.
So you're not minimizing it by telling your kid like, oh, like, you know, I know what you're saying, and I want to know if that's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. If it works, it's okay. But like I said, every situation is different. Every social dynamic is different. The other thing is, if your child doesn't have a friend, do everything that you can to build a friendship. children do not need to be popular. They don't need to be liked by the masses, but the value of a friendship in a child's life is enormous, and your chances of being bullied, if you stand next to one person rather than alone, decrease dramatically. The minute you are with one other human being, you are much less likely to be targeted. So just thinking about your child's broader social life. Do they have a couple of good friends? How are they with those friends? What can I do as a parent? And it's always, of course, much easier when they're younger to contribute to their social life. You can say, who am I picking up for a play date? Where do you want to go? You know, try making play dates for 8th graders. You can't, you know, by then you've totally lost any power whatsoever. They arrange their own social lives. But even then, I remember times when I would call people in the community that we knew we wanted to get our boys better connected, and we would say, let's go bowling together this Sunday, or how about you come for Shabbos? This way, you know, we'll cement the boys a little bit, or it'll, you know, smooth over some dynamic that's been a little bit difficult. You know, we have to work sometimes back channels by doing whatever we can to make sure that our children socially have some roots. Yeah.
So as the parent of a boy or boys, it's often kind of hard to get the details out of them. So the bus is a little bit like the Lord of the Flies coming on, based on what I'm understanding. And you know, there's a lot of power dynamics going on the bus, but I cannot get a good understanding of what's actually happening.
No, boys, it's like they work for the CIA.
Right.
You know, one-word answers. If they tell you, they'll have to kill you. You know, no. I used to say, where are you going out? Who, you know, when they were teenagers, who are you going with? Guys. Which guys? You don't know them. What are you doing? Stuff. Like, you know, you can't get, and girls, where are you going? Oh, well, we're going to go here, and then we're going to go there, and Shira's coming, but not Dvara, not Batya, because she's busy with, you know. And you get like a story that you can't find the beginning or end because it's so long. So it's so different getting information.
I have one of those on the same bus.
Right, right.
So between the two of them, I have no
buses
idea.
are, you know, they're like a total mystery to me. In that, if somebody said to me, Rona, you can have a job where you're responsible for, I don't know, 40, how many kids are on a bus? 60, how many kids are? 60 kids. You're responsible for the lives and welfare of 60 children. You can't look at them. You can't look at them, and you're operating heavy machinery while you do it. I would say, are you a lunatic? Why would I take that job? It's absolutely absurd. There are, you know, some strategies that schools try and that use to make buses better and work on busing. It's very, very hard because the only adult who is on the bus is driving the bus. You don't have, right? You don't have anybody else on the bus.
And that's the problem, is like, how do you get the story of what is actually happening?
If you don't see it, you'll never know the true story.
Right. And the truth is, even the people who can give you the story, you're not always going to get, you know, you would need 14 different children from 8 different angles to tell you the story, and it might not even be right. I mean, at some point, the reality is what your child is experiencing. So a child who comes home and says, you know, the bus really feels terrible to me, it doesn't matter whether that's true or not true. It's how it feels to them, and so we have to help them and strategize. And you know, you can sometimes ask about seating, and can I arrange that this child sits in the front or this child doesn't sit in the front? Can I arrange? I've had parents who make a deal with their siblings. You must sit with your sibling because that is the only way that I know what is happening with the younger sibling if the older one sits with them, or vice versa. You know, some parents who say, I'll let you take a special coloring book on the bus. I don't know if they're allowed to have electronics on the bus. But, you know, different strategies to try to make it okay. So there was another hint.
I feel like that's where, like, not just where, but police flourish along the bus.
Yeah. Yeah, she was also.
Like, my kids have been on the, we've lived in different places, but it's all been in the same area, and they end up with the same bully on the bus every year. So maybe she'll stop bullying one of my kids directly, but she'll go pin another one against that kid, you know, like, they flourish on the bus, and it's very hard to control it.
Are you supposed to call a parent? So I was thinking, do you call a parent? Like, when do you call a parent to say your kid is bothering my kid and not include the school?
So, my advice is, you can, you can always call a parent to talk about that parent's child. Because we all know every parent loves somebody calling them to tell them what's wrong with their child. Everybody's totally open to that and wants to hear it. And that sarcasm is, you know, it's well meant. That being said, you might get me on the other end. And I would want to know if my child was bothering your child. And I'd want to invest. I don't know that I would hear, you know, everything every minute that you say. And I might be defensive at first, but I would go back to my child and I would be working with them on it. So use caution and don't have high expectations. The other thing is, one of the things like I said, I just did this workshop with educators, and I said there are 2 rules. The 2 first rules when you're dealing with bullying in your school where you work. Rule number 1 is do something. Rule number 2 is do no harm. And sometimes those two rules seem to go against each other. Because sometimes everything you think of doing is going to do harm. If I'm going to call the parent who drives carpool on Tuesdays and Thursdays, drives my kid in carpool on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and tell them that their kid is bothering my kid, and then I have to worry, is that parent going to be mean to my kid in carpool? I don't know. Is that a good idea? Or if they're going to tell their kid, and then their kid is going to, you know, tell the whole 5th grade that, you know, I got in trouble with my mother because his mother called my mother. You know, you have to think about it. One of the things that I've done over the years with my closest friends, who we're lucky that some of our children's close friends were close friends with their parents, so we kind of made pacts. You know, when our children were still not at teenage years, like we said, do you want to know if I see your kid smoking, drinking, in the wrong place, not where they should be, do you want to know? And we talked about it before it happened and said, yes, we wanted to know. And I did. I did have a friend of mine come up to me and said, I saw something happen. You said you want to know, and I'm going to tell you. And I also had the opportunity to go to a friend and say, we said we wanted to see something happening. I have to tell you that on a school day, I saw your son in the comic book store. I don't know if you know that he wasn't in school today. He was at the comic book, you know. So if you do things, if it's a parent you know and you feel comfortable with, it's very different than if it's just, you know, someone who's in the grade but you don't really know the parent. And you can start the phone call by saying, I really thought about whether I should make this call or not, and you have every right to parent your child anyway. Believe me, don't believe me, but I felt that if it were me on the other end, I might want to know. I might want this information. I might want to do something with it. I'm just letting you know. And by the way, that's the way I suggest to deal with schools as well. I always say, you'll appreciate this, inform, do not storm the school. Tell a school what's happening. Don't say, I demand you do blah, 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 blah. But give them the information, because it could be that the child who's bullying on your bus is also bullying on the playground and is also bullying, and the school only knows 1 piece or 2 pieces. And it may not be acting on it because they think it's, you know, it only happened once, but you know that it's happened more times. And schools, I'll give you 2 examples of where calling a school and just giving them information made a huge difference, and then we should probably wrap up. One was in high school, that my son came home. This is the popularity issue. My son came home and told me that he had been invited to somebody's house for Shabbos, but he wasn't sure he wanted to go because this was a nerdy kid. And he wasn't sure, 9th grade, he wasn't sure he wanted to get known as one of the nerdy kids. So I told him I didn't like that, and I felt very uncomfortable that there were nerdy kids, and that, you know, I'm kind of a nerd, and I like nerds, and there's nothing wrong with nerds. And, you know, I tried my best to tell him my feelings about it, but I also said, you know, it's the very beginning, and I hope that your grade in a small all-boys school, your grade would become more accepting of everyone, which, by the way, by 12th grade, they totally were. But what I did do was get on the phone with the head of the school and let him know that I did not want him to do anything. I wasn't calling to demand action. I was calling to share with him a piece of information that I thought would be useful to him. And he was incredibly appreciative because he said, I couldn't put my finger on it, but I haven't been sensing that the grade is coalescing the way I would like. I think it's time for some bowling, some outings, some Shabbatonim, whatever that's going to help the grade coalesce. So please, I do not want my child to know that I made this phone call. This is totally between us. Fine, perfect. And it worked out very well. Things did get better. The second example, when my middle son was in 6th grade, he came home very, very excited. I can't make these stories up. They're just like, it's too amazing. Very excited. On Friday afternoon, can I go to Chestnut Park to play ball? And I say, yeah, okay. Is Jeremy also? Every Friday afternoon is with Jeremy. That's his Friday afternoon routine, is Jeremy comes over and they hang out in our backyard, whatever. No, Jeremy can't come. This is the boy thing again. What do you mean Jeremy can't come? He's away for Shabbos? No, Jeremy can't come. Jeremy's mother won't let him go to Chestnut Park? No, Jeremy can't come. Why can't Jeremy come? They said, if Jeremy comes, I can't play. After hours of trying to get the story out, it turns out that the 6th grade guys decided that they own the public space in Chestnut Park and decide who plays and who doesn't play. And my son, who happens to be, my unbiased opinion, an amazing athlete, finally got the nod after 6 weeks of like drooling that he wants to be invited. And he wants to go play in Chestnut Park. This problem, his best friend can't come with him. I call my husband because I think, okay, anti-bullying girl is going to make a ruling here. Maybe I'm missing some guy thing. And God bless, my husband says, well, this isn't like Germany where public space is banned to certain people. Either he goes with his friend or he doesn't go. I said he's very peace-loving. He's not going to get into conflict. He just won't go. He won't play ball. And my husband says, so be it. And sure enough, my son does not play ball that weekend. On Monday, I call the 6th grade Rebbe because I'm concerned that there's going to be fallout that my son didn't show up, and I don't want him to have trouble. And again, I say to the Rebbe, I'm not asking you to do anything. I simply want to let you know this is what's happening in your class. The Rebbe does not live in our neighborhood. He can't be involved in this on Friday afternoons. He's long gone. But I thought you'd want to know that this is what's happening in the class. The following Thursday, my son comes home, elated. Ima, Rabbi Z posted in the lunchroom, come one, come all, West Hempstead boys. Chestnut Park, sign below. And for the rest of the school year, on every Monday, that Rebbe asked the boys how the game was. Did you get to play center field? Did you pitch this time? Hey, how come she didn't pitch? It was her turn. And he had enormous impact on the social dynamics of the class because I had made that phone call. By the way, I called 8 parents that Friday afternoon, 8 parents in the class to find out what had been happening. And of the 8, 6 of them had known what was going on. 2 of them had been clueless like I was. But nobody had called the school. Nobody had informed them. The school would never have known. So sometimes sharing information with a school allows wonderful educators, great school leaders, it allows them to be creative and do amazing things. But don't make, don't call with, I need this and you have to do this, and you have to have reasonable expectations, and wonderful things can happen. Yeah, last question.
I'm still not sure. If your kid is in a circle of friends and he's constantly being picked on by one boy, how do you tell, like, I always say, like, oh, poor thing, he doesn't realize, like, he has a hard time sharing. Like, I try to just be sympathetic about it, but if it keeps happening, how will that help him? Like, it's not going to give him more backbone to stand up to him. It just comes to me, and then eventually I know he won't come to me at a certain age.
Young? This is how old?
It's like 5.
5, okay. So we have really high expectations of little guys. If I came to your house tomorrow and I said, could I please use your car, your jewelry? I'd like, your best stuff in your kitchen. Can I have it? I'm just borrowing it for a while. I'll give it back to you. You share, don't you? We'd all find it hard to do. And yet, we ask little kids to share all the time. Some sharing is also, it's the kind of thing that it's on a continuum, and some kids care less about stuff and they'll readily share, and other kids are very possessive and won't. At 5, I don't consider that bullying, that someone won't share. I consider that a child who's struggling with, the social give and take. And I don't see that as...
I'm not saying that it's his object. I'm saying he'll take whatever he had, no matter what he plays with, that kid will target.
Take his stuff. Yeah, so, you know, you can say, no, I want to hold it, no, I want to keep it, I'll give you a turn, we can give different strategies, but also at 5, where, you know, grown-ups do have to sometimes intervene and set parameters. Grown-ups have to say to that other 5-year-old, no, Donnie, you can't take the shovel yet. You know, it's Moshe's turn. When I ring the bell, then you can have the shovel. But we can do that with 5-year-olds. If we're doing that with 8th graders, we're in trouble, you know? But we have to sometimes put the structure in with little ones because some of them just are not able to do that. If this were a different talk, I would have asked people in this room, you know, how many of you went to nursery school? And you're all young enough that probably many of you would raise your hand. But in the generation in which I was raised, and I'm again not so ancient, but it would have been rare for people to raise their hand that they went to nursery school. School started at kindergarten. And that meant that until you were 5 years old, you didn't have to manage social difficulties. You know, you just had to deal with your parents and your siblings. You didn't have to learn all the stuff that we asked and get along in the world with others. So we are demanding a lot of children. And some children have a harder time than others. Yeah, I keep on saying last question, but
I started the session
have no
tonight
idea
about the science and all that of the empathy. We also have 3 boys and a daughter, and our second son seems like he's got that lack of empathy.
My second son also. Must be
No
a
matter
second son
what
issue.
we do, he'll beat up on the older as well as the younger sibling.
Yeah. So again, here's the 2 things about empathy. There's a classic experiment. There's a classic experiment called the marshmallow experiment. You know the marshmallow experiment? You take a child and you put them in a room with a marshmallow. And you say, if you don't eat this marshmallow in the next 5 minutes, I'll give you a second marshmallow. And there are children who are so wonderfully planful that they sit there and they say, I'll get 2, and I'll wait. And there are other children who just say, you know, the kids who are struggling with their aggressive impulses are not necessarily bullies. They want something. They want something in that moment, and it's hard for them to wait for it. And again, our job as parents is to help grow them out of those difficulties and give them the strategies to do that. I will tell you, I had one of those children.
Middle child syndrome, did you have?
No, mine wasn't the middle. I had one of those. And I will tell you, it is just, it denies belief because we still don't believe it. We still, I mean, last night my husband said something about, oh, how nice, a phone call from, and he said, who ever thought I would have said that? You know, like, this was a child who gave us every gray hair we have. And who would have thought that this is now the child who is the most empathic person in our family, is extraordinarily caring. You know, marriage really helped. So I know that's a long way off, but you know, kids grow and change, and they do develop skills, and they change as.
Can I give you one example? Because I was shocked beyond belief. Do you ever read the book Chrysanthemum?
Long time, yeah, but I don't remember it.
The girl was teased in school from her name, and when she would go home, the mom would love her and give her attention, and she would come back okay. I'm like, Benjamin, how would you feel if someone in school, like, you see how sad she is? Like, how would you feel if someone made fun of your name or called you names? Like, I punch him in the face. I'm like, Benjamin. I was trying to get like, oh, well, yeah, that would be sad. I'll feel sad. Like, I'll punch him in the face. I'm like, Benjamin.
It's a 5-year-old.
But
we don't raise
this is 5. This is a 5-year-old. So again, he's saying what's the first thing that comes to his mind. He hasn't even learned yet that that's socially inappropriate to say.
No, they know.
But the interesting thing to me is that you can translate that, because if he says, I'd punch him in the nose, you're saying, so that means you don't like it. You have to label the feeling for him. The feeling's there. He's telling you the feeling's there. He's telling you the way I deal with feelings is like this.
Well, that's true.
Okay, so he's 5. We'll go from, you know, this to a different way of dealing with feelings. But he's not saying, I could care less, which I thought that you were going to say he doesn't care.
That's
but that also,
like he didn't care, but I guess
we can't parent only by what our children tell us. Because children will say, I don't care. You know, you punish them. I don't care. You say, how would you feel if? I wouldn't care. It doesn't bother me. That doesn't mean that's how they feel. It's their macho response at that moment. Yes.
My daughter, I mean, socially she's fine. There is one group, it's not even in school, that she's out of the group, and it bothers her. Should I, like, let's say they invited her to a birthday, she said, you know what, I don't want to go because they're not my friends. What should I do? Should I push her towards that, or I'm like, you know what? Stay out. What am I supposed to do?
I don't know all the dynamics, so you have to use your wisdom to decide, and I'm going to give you my metaphor for it. If a parent comes to me and says, the only thing my child eats is peanut butter, it's the only thing they eat, peanut butter, morning, noon, and night, only peanut butter. Is this a problem? I'm going to say, yes. You need to eat something other than peanut butter, aside from the fact that it's probably verboten at Har Torah and every other school. But like, you need nutritionally something other. But if a parent comes to me and says, you know, all my child eats is peanut butter, noodles, chicken, apples, and carrots. You know what? You can live on that. It may not be the diet I'd like, but you can live on that. So you have to think about, is that other group that she's not part of so critical or central, or is she okay not doing it? But you also have to think about another thing. I like to ask myself the question, this might not be a problem now, is it going to be a problem a year from now or 2 years from now? Again, I'll say from my own experience, and it's the child who was here, hates sports, is the most non-athletic boy, can't stand anything about sports, is now actually an avid runner, but no team sports, nothing with eye-hand coordination. Okay, can you be a boy and not play sports and have friends? Not so easily. Not so easily. So we required you had to belong to a team every year. It could be, you know, in our PAL, you could do soccer, or our shul league. Soccer, Little League, basketball, you had to pick one. He picked Little League always because he calculated the number of games in a season, and there were fewer Little League games than anything else. But we forced him, I'm telling you, under such protest, probably from the time he was 5, and it was, you know, wiffle ball, t-ball, whatever, till he was in middle school, you must play a sport. And to this day, he has friends that he made he knows they were on his team. You know, they were on his Young Israel team. There are things you make a decision about socially that even though your child says, I'm not going, I don't want to go, you push them because you know long term this is really important for their social development. So you have to use your judgment. Thank you all very much. Have a wonderful evening.